And I'm going to ask you all to introduce yourselves, starting with Tess, over on the left, please.
Hello. Hi, everyone. I'm Tess. I lead FreeWheel in the region. We're pretty new to the Australian market. We're an ad tech company. We support buyers and sellers with a specific focus on streaming and premium video.
Hi everyone, I'm Dianna Molinaro, or Dee. I head up News Australia's streaming and digital strategy and look after Tubi. So that's where I'm talking about today.
Hi, I'm Casey. I'm head of strategy at Audience Group. We are an independent media agency based out of Brisbane, but we have clients all over the eastern seaboard.
Hi everyone, I'm Brooke Aniseko. I'm Head of Digital and Data for PMX across Australia and New Zealand, which is in Publicis Groupe. I'm mostly focused on product development, partnerships and digital operations.
And I'm Julia Edwards from Nine Entertainment. I'm the Director of Programmatic Sales across streaming and publishing.
Thank you very much. Yes, we only have 4 microphones and 5 speakers, so a little bit of handing over will be going on. It's no longer COVID, we can share. So Tess, I'm going to start with you as the independent kind of specialist vendor for premium video, and obviously you've got a global view and a local view. And it'd be interesting to see, in terms of some of the findings that we've reported here locally, how does that align with what you're seeing globally in terms of sort of revenue trends and product trends? If you compare the two.
Yeah, so very exciting to see such strong growth across video, obviously, as Nat shared earlier. And I think, most of that heavily driven by CTV and social video, which is very clear to all of us. But I think what's interesting when you kind of dig in beneath kind of the macro trends globally, is that there are some pretty kind of interesting distinctions between the way that this market is operating and what we're seeing in the US and the European markets as well. So in the US market specifically, we've seen video and digital video outpace linear for the first time last year. And so there's a very strong shift of linear dollars into those types of environments. But I really want to kind of emphasize that's a market that is, heavily fragmented, had significant cable penetration, like at one point was at 90%. And so the kind of shift of that business, I think, makes a lot of sense, and the pace of which, that's happening. I think the other area that's really interesting is CTV penetration even. In Australia, it's doubled since just before the pandemic, which I think is really interesting in terms of the rate of smart TV adoption, but we don't really see the same thing in Europe. That's actually a region that is heavily kind of scaled across a lot of other devices as well, which is really, really interesting. In the US too, I think we're also seeing a lot of newer advertisers in programmatic streaming environments too. We saw an uptick of 14% last year, which is actually like really, really significant. And so, seeing kind of an influx of brands that are actually able to kind of be in that space, I think is really interesting for us. The other thing as well that I feel like I always say, but I think is really important just to underscore, something that always shocks me is just the rate of programmatic adoption here versus any other region in the world. We are leading the way at 60%. The US is at about 33%, and Europe kind of more around that kind of 19-20% based on the data that we see. I would even call out the UK as like even less than that. And obviously it differs based on the publisher and what their sales strategy is, but I think it really indicates just the kind of sophistication of this market and just an overall desire, obviously based on the people in this room, to really kind of innovate and use data and kind of programmatic pipes to improve the buying experience. So yeah, very interesting. So macro trends are the same, but I think underneath it all there are some pretty important distinctions.
That is really interesting, actually, the programmatic side of it. I mean, you'd be able to see that. And that's due to the established outcomes that buyers are seeing. They're leaning into it more and more here than you're seeing in other markets. That's fantastic.
Yeah, more so than the kind of dollars, shifting, I think, directly into video. You're seeing kind of the rate of the way that the buying is taking place change so much. So I think that just kind of underscores how important it is to further simplify that process as well for both buyers and publishers. And I still think we've got a way to go there.
And actually, to come to you then, Casey, because we saw from the report the impact in terms of measurement, and how branding and performance both are being utilised as important. And you were pretty passionate in our pre-call around how significant the opportunities within video are as a touch point. So can you dig into that a little bit, please, for us?
Yeah, we often talk about video having the capacity. I think when you have intelligent implementation, it has the capacity to be a super touch point. Now, Andrew Tyndall's kind of coined that term. But we talk about it in agency around making sure that it works, what are the things and levers we can pull to make sure that it works really hard for us across the funnel, and that's where it has the super touch point capabilities. And I think it really comes down to three things really: is is the objective set with intention, but also does the creative meet the objective, but also does the inventory that we're buying also meet that objective? So that's where the complexity lies, I know. But once all those things are humming and we have those things working really nicely together and we are producing creative that is fit for purpose, that's where we really see it working really hard for us from a long-term brand effect perspective, but also from a short-term brand effect perspective.
Yeah, interesting. It shows us how powerful it is in both areas, a long way from the old gross rating points and TARPs of linear telly.
And that's what listening to Ben speak, I think it's really powerful in making sure that as a media agency, we don't control the creative, but when we have really close working relationships with our creative agencies, we do have really constructive working groups and outputs that we make sure that the creative can be fit for purpose across channels, across inventories, from mobile to big screen. So yeah, that's where we see the most effect. And
Dianna or Dianna?
Whatever you want. Dianna.
D. We'll go Dianna. In terms of AVOD platforms, and it feels like Australia was a little slow to kind of wrap their arms around the opportunities there, both in terms of consumer consumption and for brands. But part of your role at News Corp is working with and representing Tubi. What's sort of driven that success, and what can you tell us about the recent upticks there?
Well, I'll first ask, who knows what Tubi is, or have you heard of Tubi? Okay, I think we've done our job. But it was here same time last year that we kind of launched or relaunched the Tubi positioning, and News took over that sales representation. And it's really like my job to ensure that the market's really clear on what the Tubi offering is and why it's so different. You're right, AVOD adoption's been quite slow, but we have a very mature BVOD market. So when you're looking at that free-to-stream opportunity, it's like, where does Tubi fit in that mix? And being one of the largest streaming platforms globally and amassing 100 million monthly active users, here locally we didn't have that same awareness of the offering, and so we've really been on a journey to ensure that we're bringing the most premium content we can into the platform. And their offering is so vast in how that content serves different niches. And so what we're talking around is like the studio licensing deals that we bring into that platform, understanding what an AVOD model actually means is the biggest education piece. You're incentivizing the user to come to the platform to get a really premium experience, but they know in return that they are served ads. And today, I guess, we're kind of all feeling the pinch, and the cost of living pressures are actually making Tubi a very attractive proposition for advertisers, especially in that, how do we move BVOD, or how do we start to understand the role that Tubi plays to extend that reach? And the proposition for Tubi is around finding those niche audiences that are kind of underserved against the other platforms. So when we look at BVOD, when we look at SVOD, Tubi does have an incremental audience that can't be found across those platforms. And so when you're looking at what exactly they're consuming across Tubi, it's like a vast array of different types of content. So if you've been to the platform, you'll find the weird and wonderful, but you'll also find those big blockbuster Hollywood classics that really draw you in and keep you into the platform. I will say the one thing though for the Australian market that we've seen huge adoption around is Tubi's Creativerse and Tubi original content. So Australia actually has the highest propensity in all Tubi global teams to consume the most amount of creator content. And I think that's a really unique thing that we can talk to here in this market, because as we saw from the Fabulate numbers, creator content's obviously rising so rapidly, but the role that brands can play against a free-to-stream platform and bringing that brand message against that created content is really unique.
Yeah, I want to dig into that a little bit in a moment. But actually, when we were chatting prior, you quite rightly corrected me because I was bundling sort of AVOD in with the sort of free ad-supported sort of fast, program telly, and you're quite keen to...
I'm very passionate about where it sits, and I think that's because it's still on demand and it's premium, and it's not programmable. And I think that's the biggest differentiation when we look at how sometimes the agencies or clients compare Tubi. They're like, you don't have, a big flashy title, and we might not. I think that's the honest truth, but that's not what we're there to serve. We want people to come to the platform and find a niche and really go hard on that niche, whether it's, K-pop drama or thriller, horror. If you look at the Tubi original content, it's like purely there for youth audiences, and they do well in their categories, and that's the unique part about it when we look at the positioning.
Very good, thank you. I'll tell you, my wife is obsessed with Tubi, so you've got a dedicated viewer there. Now, Brooke, and it's really interesting to see Nathan, what Fairleight's doing and the information he was presented, and some of the numbers that we've seen out of the report this morning, and what's really supporting and beefing up social video spend is that sort of creator-led video. So how are you at Publicis sort of looking at that as an opportunity and building it into your planning and buying?
Yeah, so we absolutely have seen astronomical growth in this space across all markets, and it's recognised as a huge focus area for our global business. And Australia specifically has been recognised as kind of leading the way in this space in a lot of ways, which is always exciting for us. And I think the most interesting part is, which Nathan spoke to, how it plays a role across all parts of the marketing funnel. I mean, I even see that in my own experience in people that you trust, you come to trust in your experience on like Instagram, going from, I didn't know I needed that, to purchasing within several minutes, right?
I call that, I've been Instagrammed. They'll say, oh, great pants, thanks, I was Instagrammed.
Yeah, like I have packages arrive and I'm like, what's that? And it's something that I bought at 2 a.m. that I never knew that I needed, and then I've purchased.
You got Instagram.
I did. That's how it happens over and over. So it's so interesting how it's not just all parts of the funnel, but how quickly you can move through the funnel, right? It's a really interesting space, and for our clients, what we're seeing now, it's not about should we use creators, it's about how we're going to effectively use creators, and that's absolutely what we're focused on in guiding our clients through.
Yeah, it's very, very interesting. And before I come to you, Julia, we're talking a little about some of the quirks in Australia, and I just can talk about live events and sports and that shift very aggressively, as Tess mentioned, around the shift to streaming, driven by companies such as yours. But the whole BVOD thing, so because you were in the US market, weren't you, Tess? And Australia remains one of the few markets that actually use the term BVOD?
We're special.
Yeah, we are special.
We're very special. BVOD is unique to this market.
Yeah, I had a bit of a chat with Gay about it too. It's just one of those those bits and pieces, because there's even other terms that you sometimes see in the US, like MVPM or whatever it is, like the multi.
Oh, MVPD.
That'll be the one. Yeah,
it's a distributor.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Well, look, back to Australia, and in terms of live events, obviously sports is one of the core offerings for you, Julia, and everything that Nine provides there. In fact, I'm a little rusty this morning because I was up watching European soccer this morning, being a sports tragic.
On Stan Sports.
Pardon?
On Stan Sports.
Absolutely, yeah. But there, yeah, anytime. Well, it's a big month of soccer ahead, and I was talking to Moffat from SBS. Obviously, the soccer World Cup's coming. Sorry about that. So, look, other platforms are available. But around that, there's a lot of work going on, and I don't want to nerd out too much. I'll let you do that. But in terms of the opportunities around live events and sports in particular, for both the sort of consumer experience and the monetization opportunities.
Yeah, it's a big topic. There is a lot of work being done. There's almost a decade's worth of experience that we have at Nine. We've been doing programmatic live sports for over a decade, and Tess mentioned, obviously the adoption of programmatic in Australia is far beyond the rest of the world, which has been beneficial for us, but it also means that we see the issues first. So we have been working really extensively, both from an engineering perspective and a personnel and resource perspective, to ensure that programmatic across live sports can work effectively. It is our most premium inventory, and we need to make sure that every impression we can monetize to the best of our ability. And there's a lot of challenges, and it's not just within the programmatic ecosystem that challenges. In fact, a majority of the issues that we have start at our ad server. So we've been doing a lot of work with our partners to improve that. There's still ways that we can continue to improve that, and we have to localise that as well. There is huge discrepancies when it comes to how even the nature of the sporting events that we have. An American NFL team playing for 4 hours is a very different event to NRL in Australia. And the ecosystem's not built for Australia, and it needs to be in order for us to ensure that we can continue to see that growth in programmatic across live sports. The other issue that we have is, to the sort of earlier speakers, that there is a fragmentation of where people think that content is available. The other day I saw a vendor saying there are home sports and yet not have paid for one single sports rights. But just because they have an access point through the programmatic pipes, they're sort of positioning themselves as the home of sport, and that creates confusion in market. It creates dilution of the content, and it makes it very difficult as well for us to ensure that all of that technical capability that we need to ensure works seamlessly for a big event to happen correctly. It creates confusion around that as well. So lots of things that are exciting about live sports and live events, but lots of things that we as a collective community need to work on to improve. Yeah, and there's a bit of onus on us as a local IAB with the work happening largely at the Tech Lab in the US on a live events ad playbook, because as you say, some of the infrastructure locally and just the way the pipes work are a little clunkier than people may realise. And some of those numbers, I mean, the percentage in Australia is incredibly impressive in terms of the percentage that are now viewing live sports, and something can happen like that you have to react to, and the opportunity's there. And if you've got a DSP that's waiting 24 hours to bid because they're trying to find an audience based on their household graph, that is a missed opportunity. It's a hugely missed opportunity. So you almost need a customised DSP bidder for sports in its own nature that perhaps is not looking at traditional display-based logic and algorithms, because display does not translate into streaming. And there will be some work. I was just going to say, the IAB Tech Lab work that came out just towards the end of last year around the live event playbook, I think sets out all these challenges really well. We were working really closely with Jonas, there were a number of other vendors as well, as NBCU, and I think two kind of interesting things came out of it. One was a set of APIs to support the sharing of concurrence, so that you have a sense of when that viewership is increasing. That, I don't think things have been adopted yet, but that's on the kind of roadmap. The second is much more kind of greater insight shared with DSP platforms, in particular around scheduling and things like that, and what those viewership spikes will look like. So I'm hopeful that those two things, even getting all those people in a room, I think is a big step. So you got it. Absolutely. Thank you very much. You did my but we need to do a bit more on that, particularly with the pre-fetching work that's going to come, and we can kind of, hopefully this time next year, present that and see what a local pilot. And I think that's why the local IAB team is so important, because you take those great things like Global Leap and you localise them and take in local considerations. That's the intent. Thank you very much. You're welcome back, Julie, any time. Actually, sticking with you, Tess, then, in terms of innovation, that is one
area, a little detail. But what are others that you're seeing in and around CTV you're particularly excited about?
Yeah. So obviously we believe that not all video is the same and it's not all equal. I think streaming in particular deserves its own set of solutions. That's where we're focused. In terms of innovation, I feel like there are a couple of really interesting waves of innovation that are kind of coming at us right now. Most of them all kind of powered in some way by AI. I feel like it's something that we haven't talked about a lot today, but I'll spend a few minutes on it. So I think the first is around agentic. And I'm curious to see, based on this room, who is actually considering or evaluating agentic buying methodologies right now. If we could raise hands. This is a couple. I think that there's a lot of discussions happening right now. I do think the IAB released a report in the US overnight, which just kind of showcased maybe some kind of quicker conversations and adoption around agentic, but I still think we're very much kind of scratching the surface of where things could go. Most of those conversations are a lot more focused around how you can improve internal workflows, but our position or perspective is very much that we need to ensure that the foundations are all correct. AI, I'm sure if you're using any of this in your own personal life, garbage in, garbage out. So I think that's kind of one area of focus, ensuring that we have the correct foundation. So MCP servers in particular, I think for us is a major focus. Second area is around smarter targeting. Again, I think there's a huge area where AI is already providing a lot of really interesting solutions around contextual and being able to evaluate content at the asset level to create kind of brand safe environments. I think that's really, really interesting. And then the last one is around kind of how streaming could be bought in a simpler way and be more like social. And I think AI also has a huge role that it can play there. There's the simplification of the buying process in one space, but I also think there's a lot of really interesting things around personalised creative that we can do as well, but that requires, I think, much stronger infrastructure around kind of creative approvals and making sure that we're all evaluating that before things go to air. The last thing that I would say, though, is all those innovations are really exciting and interesting. We're preparing for what's ahead of us, but I also think that there's some foundational things that we still need to get right. You know, I was really interested to hear the conversation from Ben earlier. It was so focused around frequency, and I find even that conversation, you know, interesting and something that I think, you know, we need to solve for here.
Yep. So we do have an intent to run a local pilot here as those sort of foundational protocols are being established for agentic, that is. And the US report was interesting. The overall number looked quite high, but you can see there's bits of almost testing they're utilising in different areas. As you say, a lot of it's internal, and there's a difference between the sort of bigger brands and the smaller businesses in terms of what they're focusing on, which is something.
Yeah, I thought that was really interesting.
Yeah.
That there's like a higher rate of adoption across like the smaller brands
Yeah.
at the moment. So.
I also think that agentic adoption side of things makes sense for markets who are lower from a programmatic standpoint. Like that definitely makes sense to me.
Operationally more effective, and if you've got the right guardrails and you predetermined what you want from it sensibly, you can let it run with humans in the loop or whatever. We are going to do a session on it at our event, look at me plugging away, in Melbourne in early June. So look out for that at Tech and Ops. We'll nerd out a bit on it, and we're sort of looking forward to it. But we do want to push some of those, some of that work out through Exec Tech Council and S&G and RAL working groups. So look out for it. Now, in terms of formats, Dianna, is there anything that you're seeing around formats for all types of video in particular that's new or changing or particularly effective in the last few months?
It seems like everyone wants a pause ad these days. So pause ads has probably had the biggest demand. How that's transacted is something that I think a lot of the streamers are working through and making that accessible programmatically. I'd love to say that I think Tubi does have one of the largest pause ads that take over the whole screen, and the demand for that's been really, really strong. I think the unique thing that we have with Tubi is because it is built on a ad server, like predominantly that the business actually built the whole offering around the ad experience, and so they've got these really interesting high impact formats like the first impression buys that are actually like the old OTPs that Google used to enable us to run. So having those really intrusive formats is really key to them. The other part is more around the thematic contextual buys that you can do across the platform, and that's had huge success. When we've looked at consideration impact on those particular formats, we've seen 24% increase, even though brands are only potentially putting around 10 to 12% of their budget against Tubi as a platform. So we're seeing really strong results against it. The big thing for us, though, and I need to mention our owned and operated assets, and having contextual environments that are really core to consumers' day-to-day content consumption, is how we bring Tubi into that mix. So how do we now connect with Australians across all screens? The video unification of how you can buy across all of the platforms now, and the proposition and what it means when you're applying your data targeting across it. So when we've looked at that unified buy and unifying the frequency and the reach, we've seen significant sales impact, and that's really helping us connect that user journey and the creative messaging. So I'd say effectiveness is as good as the understanding of the creative you put behind those platforms. I think you mentioned that, and ensuring that you've got right fit for purpose.
So there was there's something called the ad portfolio for CTV that's come out over Christmas. The drafts were released that are now finalised, I think, for 7 new formats, including pause, screensaver, squeeze backs. And there were 2 versions of that, which was actually the ad that would squeeze back and you could kind of interact via a QR code with your remote. But they actually standardised more the one where it's the content that does that, and then the ad, which is kind of interesting. There's 5 different versions, so it's worth a look. We'll perhaps share them with the slides from today, so you can see. But that's standardising those newer formats, and pause was the one that was really in demand. That's fairly adopted now.
There's some really weird names out, like little scrubbers and things like that that I've seen. So, but yeah, I think the unique thing is, as long as the platforms are all doing what's unique to them. I think that's the biggest thing. Yeah.
Now, a big topic that came out of our report was around measurement, naturally, and it was ever thus, and it was interesting to see that cross-media measurement as the number one kind of pain point, or something to still be worked on collaboratively. So, Casey, when talking to your clients in relation to measurement, what is it you're now sort of focusing on? How do you, where do you start?
We are very intentionally trying to simplify it. So it's apt that this panel is about simplification, but it's really important. Data is like crack to us now, I think. We all get addicted to it. We've fed it every single day. But it can also be extremely overwhelming. So it's our job as an agency to simplify it and genuinely tell you what we should be looking at and what are the early signals. And not everyone has the luxury of running MMMs. And even brand tracking longer term. But, in order to feed that crack addiction, I think it's really important that we are really clear around a simplified, really simple structure in what we're taking a look at and what is signalling early performance, long-term and brand term. And some of the things we look at that are not necessarily a little bit out of the box is we're making sure that, are our placements genuinely in a place getting the attention that it requires for the memory encoding? Are we getting an unfair share of voice? And we're also looking at what are the other signals happening in and around the other channels in which video is being traded with, and what are the broader effects that it's potentially having an effect on. So I think it's important that we're really clear up front that we're setting those simple line of one thought processes with the client and not get distracted by the noise.
Yeah, it must be difficult. So I suppose it's sort of a similar question for you, Julia, on the sales side. I mean, with the premium consumer experience you invest so heavily in, how can you then balance that with generally being effective in the solutions that you're providing? Where do you start in that sort of measurement discussion?
So there's sort of multiple areas in which we're working. We have a full suite of business outcomes reporting that we've launched over the past 2 years out of Susie's team. which includes working with partners like Mutenex, working with partners like Agile, working with partners like a new financial partner as well that we'll be launching soon, and partners like Cartology and Coles 360 to provide as much as possible really clear ways to measure our impact based on really strong deterministic data. And that's where we do spend a lot of time questioning and pushing partners to really look at what what is the measurement built off and what's that identity built off, because I think in the programmatic ecosystem in Australia, which again is quite unique to Australia, Tess, you and I were talking about this, we rely heavily on IP addresses, but the rollout of IPv6 is very limited, which means that an IP address in Australia could represent multiple households, and yet so many frequency models use IP address as the main foundation for frequency management. And that's a huge problem for us in streaming, because it means that you're making a decision to target a household that could, based on an IP address, that could represent up to 100 households.
Yep.
It's that bad.
Yep.
And no one's talking about that enough, I don't think. And if we're truly going to provide real accurate measurement for partners, we need to be questioning and digging deep into the quality of the signals that we're using.
Absolutely. I mean, the details really matter in that. And do you wonder, coming to you, Brooke, on that, do you feel it's a more mature discussion we're having now? I mean, what have you seen in the last sort of 12 months or so around how you're planning on buying, or the industry? Is there something there where we're getting to the right place, which moving in a better direction? Absolutely.
I'm so proud of where we're at in terms of BVOD. Our product that we have built within Publicis, but also just more broadly, like to your point earlier, Tess, we had a global video person here recently, and he had me fill out a market sophistication sheet before he arrived. And the first meeting we had, he came in and he said, "Well, somebody's very optimistic." And I was like, yeah, well, I am actually quite optimistic. So I'll go through it again and just triple check. And I stood by all of the the marks that I'd given us in terms of, it was all about tech sophistication, publisher sophistication in working with tech, and our score was very strong.
All right.
And I was really pleased with that as a market, what we've built and what we've worked on really closely with our tech partners and our publishers. So I think that where we're at is really positive, and I think that there has still been like quite a lot of evolution in the last kind of 12 months, and what we're focused on is moving past reach and more into outcomes-based planning and buying, but also cool things like sell-side decisioning and what that has meant for us being able to make more scalable decisions and apply the whether it's data that we have or the effectiveness measures that we want to include further up the stream to be able to open up to a more significant audience. And also just how much the change in content and increased content opportunity that's coming out of the global players, and how big that video inventory pool now is to be able to do really interesting things and find the most effective and best audience that we can for our clients.
So, so Brooke from Australia, top of the ladder, you brought home the chocolates.
Killed it.
I think that sophistication, Brooke, is also indicative of why we're seeing brands and agencies wanting to put more money into executing through video, because we are learning fast, but we're also becoming more and more intelligent and clearly developing some pretty world-class products and outputs.
Well, it's reflected in the regular quarterly revenue reports that we put together, and State of the Nation surveys like the one released today. Maybe we need to shout about it a little bit more. Maybe there's some, something we can sort of do a bit of flag waving. Sometimes Australians don't like doing that. We should perhaps be a bit prouder. What do we think, audience? Oh, you're still awake. Good. So I thought I'd check. Now, look, there is time for questions. I'm going to have one last round, but be prepared to ask super Superstellar panel, anything you like, within reason. Or actually, do we have a Slido as well running, Jen? All right, well, wave at me if there's anything good. So a bit of a sort of positive note to finish on, just very general, very open, starting with you, Tess. What are you sort of most excited about in this space generally for the rest of this calendar year?
So, I mean, I think we're rounding out on we're very sophisticated, but also highly concentrated, which I think is a good thing and allows us to make some pretty big bets and big decisions. I'm excited because I feel like we're having really interesting conversations this year that are going to dictate the way that our market continues to operate. And so I'm excited about that kind of positive momentum.
Good. Boom.
Knowing what's in the pipes on our side, I'm excited to see how the creator verse continues to grow, and also our owned and operated video offerings. So how we're working with our own creators editorially and developing more sophisticated editorial content. So I think that's a huge opportunity that the market's going to look forward to.
So you see that side of it as well, obviously. That is. So can you tell me a little bit more about the creator-verse within Tubi? What is that? Is that specific channels or is it a section you can tell of?
So they've actually pulled 200 creators from TikTok and YouTube and brought them into the Tubi platform.
Right.
So that's 5,000 long-form episodes. So now as a viewer, you're getting a really immersive fandom and connecting with that fandom across the other platforms and then bringing it into Tubi as kind of a long form.
Okay, because I know in India there's an obsession with 2 or 3 minute mini soap operas that come out daily, and everyone sort of jumps on those, which is.
Jump on the platform, see for yourself. It's pretty cool.
There we go, Casey.
I'm excited about the advance in tech to actually get the creative assets for me to plan more intelligently, because creative has always been a little bit of a roadblock. And we're seeing more and more now. We're able to move more, faster. We're able to move faster, but we're also able to be more agile in terms of platforms and placements and where we can play.
There's a few projects in relation to that, but even the LEAP playbook actually, a lot of it is just about having the right asset approved at the right time in advance. It's being sent at the wrong times. It takes 36 hours to approve and all that nonsense. Yeah. I think that's a technical term. Brooke.
I'm excited about just the size of the opportunity that we have, and yes, I think we're doing incredibly well, as we just spoke to, but there is still so much room for improvement.
Yep.
And particularly in the live space, I'm excited about what that evolution will continue to look like, and I do think there is some onus on the buy side in not trying to control pacing in a way that we're used to, and really maximising that opportunity there as well. So yeah, I think there's just so much more that we're going to be able to do and to see, and I'm really excited about what that opportunity continues to look like for the rest of the year.
Julia.
I'm going to stick with the sort of Australian pride message. I'm really excited about this local market's ability to collaborate across buy side, sell side, and I'm really excited in the next 12 months to see the ways that we can double down on that and create something really innovative and unique. Australia invented Wi-Fi. We can solve a lot of problems around, the video marketplace. And I think we've got really great people here in this market to be able to do it.
Feels like we need to follow up, sort of just pre-Christmas, see what we've done, remark ourselves. See if Brooke's still top of the class.
Yeah, scorecard check.
Yeah. All right, now